Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Unlimited. Today, we are talking about calm and order COL, control over your life. I couldn't help myself, but don't worry, that's where the Law and Order references for this episode stop. A number of my clients have come to me because they were feeling overwhelmed, unclear, disorganized, or scattered, like they don't have a good handle on something or several things in their life. They really want this sense of calm and order in their life, hence the name of this episode. And they think that there's this need to be more disciplined. If they could just have better self-control, that they would be able to achieve that calm and be able to show up more consistently the way they want to. And also, especially for entrepreneurs, being consistent in business. There's a lot of stuff there we'll dig into. But they're trying to manage their thoughts and emotions so that they can get off that emotional roller coaster that is definitely not conducive to a sense of calm. And they feel like they're fighting themselves. And there's a lot of frustration, mostly with themselves, but sometimes with other people and situations in their life too. Even though they may know that they can't control those other things, sometimes those patterns are really deeply ingrained. And sometimes we don't even realize it. Like consciously, you know that you can't control those things, but sometimes the boundaries get a little blurry if they haven't been clearly set, or maybe just because, you can't see the label on the box that you're in. So it's really hard sometimes to notice when those things are happening because you're just too close to it. So we're going to dig into how all of these things relate, and especially that idea of control and the words consistent and disciplined and how they can create some problematic dynamics. We're going to talk about knowing what's mine and what's not mine and discerning that. We're going to look at care versus control, because that actually makes a huge difference in the way you experience the process of growing. We're going to talk about a guide for clarifying and honoring your priorities. I call it a priority pyramid. It's something I was introduced to in Al-Anon and have kind of modified based on some of the learnings that I've gotten, but there's a similarity there. So if you have experience in 12-step, it may be familiar to you. And how to be intentional, especially intentional in your relationships, not just with other people, but also with yourself. We're going to explore that a little bit. We got a lot to cover in this episode, so without further ado, let's get started. Hey there, I'm Valerie Friedlander, Certified Life Business Alignment Coach, and this is Unlimited. This podcast bridges the individual and the societal, scientific and spiritual, positive and negative, nerdy and no, there's just a lot of nerdy. Come on board and let's unlock a life that's as badass as you are. There's a lot of socialized stuff around this idea of being in control and being consistent and the idea of discipline. We're going to touch a little bit on that just to kind of understand some of what that's about and where that's coming from, but we're not going to spend a ton of time on it because I want to move more into what do we do about it, and a different way of conceptualizing that, just knowing that that way of thinking can be a little problematic. So the idea of control is very embedded in the patriarchal notions of how one gets people to do things. If you're familiar with the strict father model, it's this idea that children learn through reward and punishment. The definition of control involves having the power to influence or direct people's behavior or the course of events. So it's basically power and the exercise of power and power dynamics in order to make things happen. We've taken that into this idea of controlling ourselves and self-control. And this is really tricky because, yeah, there is value in self-control, but oftentimes we think of it in terms of controlling our emotions, controlling in a way that restricts or pulls in or limits what we are. That idea of not taking up space. So like I said, that's going to be like, that's a whole nother podcast, but understanding that there's some issues with that embedded in the way we think about the world. So anytime we're using that idea of being in control, it's naturally going to tie into some of the other dynamics that we've been socialized into, because words have power and they connect to other things in our brain. Like our brain loves to make connections and see patterns. So even though our conscious thought is based in maybe self-control and being able to do what you want to do and that sort of thing, because it's embedded in structures in our society that are problematic, it's naturally going to tap into those. So there's that. The idea of consistency is very big, especially in the entrepreneurial world, but in any of the self-help sort of spaces, the idea of being consistent in doing something is also very much tied to the idea of control and being controlled and disciplined. Again, another one, right? Like these words have a lot of baggage. So while by themselves, they may be fine, or like the conscious part of your brain may see it as helpful, oftentimes it's pulling along this whole subconscious bag of a lot of other meanings and gets really mucked up. So being consistent, yes, it is helpful to do something regularly and show up regularly. It does build trust. It builds trust with yourself. It builds trust with other people to be consistent. Now, a lot of times we're trying to be consistent in things that we think we should do because somebody told us this was the right way to do it. And this is where that idea of consistency gets really mucked up. So when you are doing stuff that is loving for you, that is tied to who you are, who your highest self is, it will have some effort behind it. And it may not come easily because you're working through a lot of other layers of rules and external controls that have been internalized. But it's helpful to know that that consistency will naturally be there when it is tapped into loving for you and natural for you, tied to your gifts, to your values, to who you want to be in the world. And you're doing that work to be your best self. That's going to be more natural. Now, if you're constantly fighting yourself and fighting a lot of rules and shoulds, again, it's going to be harder. It's like pouring concrete on top of a flower. It might still be there. And if you moved the concrete, the flower would grow again. But it's harder to grow when there's concrete on top of it. So anyway, that idea. And then the idea of being disciplined. Again, discipline. Oh, goodness. Like even just that word, it sounds, when it's yours, when you're using it, I'm going to be more disciplined. It sounds great, but like it's tied to all of these, the idea of being disciplined, like by somebody else telling you what to do. It's much more of this, like you have to whip yourself into shape it up, get straight. All right. Sorry. Oh yeah. Okay. Anyway, I went there, but knowing that there's baggage. Again, there's subconscious baggage there. Moving away from that and that kind of verbiage is really key because it ties to that idea of withholding from yourself, that you have to earn love. You have to earn your value. You have to earn attention. You have to earn time. You have to earn anything that honors you and who you are. You are intrinsically valuable. I can't say it enough. I really can't, because we need to hear it all the time, because again, that's the nourishment that's going to help our little flower break through that concrete. So you are intrinsically valuable. You do not need to withhold from yourself until you've earned that. You already deserve it. So recognizing that, now also recognizing that we do need to hear it a lot because we are trying to sprout in a lot of concrete. So being aware, and we're going to talk a little bit about that next in terms of what you can and can't control. Now, there's a lot of lists out there to help people conceptualize what is yours, what is not yours, what can you control, what can't you control. And this is an exercise that I actually use a lot when starting with boundary work, when we're working on identifying what boundaries you need to set. The first thing to do, because boundaries are about how you express yourself to the world and how you teach other people how you want to be treated. So who you are and what is okay with you, what you're willing to give and what you're not willing to give. And that's another whole topic. But to be able to do that, it is important to recognize what's yours and what's not yours. So the exercise that I have in my Create Your Flow course starts with a little sheet that you can totally do on your own. You do not need my sheet, but it's paired with other things. So if you wanted other things, but it's basically just drawing a line on a piece of paper and writing on one side, what's mine, and on the other side, not mine. So, and this isn't what's mine, what's yours, because that can lead to what's called taking other people's inventory and saying what their problems are and spending time listing their problems, which can be helpful in a different context. So if you list all their problems, then you look at those and how they apply to you, because oftentimes they're reflections of things that are going on in yourself or in your life. But that's not what we're doing right now. So taking that list and going, what's mine, what's not mine. So I like to think of it like on my side of the street. I want to stay on my side of the street. So what's on my side of the street? So just as an example, I'm looking at like things you can control, things you can't control. You can't control other people's feelings, other people's actions, what they say, what they do. You can't control any of that. And you can influence situations, but sometimes circumstances are outside of your control. So sometimes listing what's outside of your control, like COVID, and what other people do with that, like those sorts of things are helpful to list out. And then you can go, okay, what can I control? What's mine? You can control your words. You can control your actions. You can control your self-care, what you pour energy into, what you pay attention to, like what media you consume, like how long you're on social media, all of what books you read, like all of that sort of stuff. You can control that. Now, one thing that a lot of times people are trying to control that you really can't control exactly is your emotions and even your thoughts, because your thoughts create your emotions. So a lot of times people think there's that whole thing, and I have a whole episode about toxic positivity, but there's this whole thing around just think positive. The problem with that is it's often turned into a way of beating ourselves up over being reactive, around having an emotional reaction, around riding an emotional roller coaster. I want to control this intensity of emotional upheaval that happens. I want to control my thoughts not being negative. I want them to be positive. I talk a lot about the issue of creating a binary here. But again, we do naturally do that, especially if we're stressed, because our stress response kicks in our survival mode, and our survival mode turns everything into right and wrong, positive and negative, because it simplifies it. When we are stressed, when we are overwhelmed, when we are frustrated, when we feel like things are coming at us, and it doesn't even matter if it's stuff we want to come at us or not want to come at us, the amount can create an overwhelm. Anytime that happens, our brain is naturally going to try and make it as simple as possible for us to make decisions, for us to deal with whatever's going on. It's that survival mode. So to simplify things, it puts it into this binary of right and wrong. Unfortunately, that can then exacerbate the sense of being under attack, because if there's a fear around making a wrong decision, then it just makes it bigger. So we tend to avoid it, because overwhelm and avoidance go hand in hand. So that idea of trying to control those things are happening automatically without your conscious brain. Those hormones are getting released automatically without your conscious brain. That is your brain taking in information from your body, from the world around you, and going, there is a potential danger here. And I'm going to make sure that we are as well protected as possible to deal with the danger. So you can't control that because that is a biological response. When we focus on trying to control that, often we exacerbate it because we're perpetuating the problem because we end up beating ourselves up over not being more controlled because it isn't something you can control. All of those things that I listed in the things you can control column are the actions you take. I don't know if you noticed that, but the idea of your actions, which I actually said, what you say, what you do, where you spend your energy, all of those things are actions. Those aren't the things that are happening internal. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the idea of acting as if, because oftentimes people are just like, I'm just going to do contrary action. I'm going to pretend that I'm not having these emotions and do what I think I should do. That may shift a pattern, but it will take much longer. Going back to what I said before about being in touch with yourself is the first piece to being able to take action that may be contrary to the stress response that you've had, but it's not contrary to your higher self. And when you do that consciously, you say, this is what I want to think or feel, or this is, if I give myself space to really look at what's going on, how true is the way I interpreted that? What's another way of looking at giving space to consider more things or to really listen to ourselves and what our needs are in the situation, make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can see things more clearly, so that our stress response isn't as to the forefront. Then we can make decisions. Oh, well, in this situation, I know that I have this triggered response, but I know that when this happens, I'm looking at the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, the most likely thing actually is this. So I want to remember that it isn't as bad as my initial response is. And so I'm going to do this other thing. So like, for example, and I've used this before, I love this example. It's, when my husband comes home, say we've set up a pattern of arguing, or there's stress. We're stressed out because of all the things going on. And he says something. I know that if I've checked in and gone, okay, well, I know that I haven't eaten yet. I'm tired. I didn't get enough sleep last night. I'm already frustrated at myself for something that I didn't get done or the stuff that's going on with the kids. I miss him because he's been away for a while. Maybe I'm hormonal because it's that time of the month. Whatever it is, I know that my brain is most likely going to interpret anything that he says, like, oh, there are dishes, as being an attack at me. Well, maybe it is, but maybe it's not. I can't control what he's thinking. I can control how I respond to it. So the first part was controlling that I took that step back and went, okay, hold up. How do I want to respond to this? Like, if I respond like it's an attack, he's going to it's going to seem like an attack back, and then we're going to end up in a fight. Whereas I can go, yes, there are, and leave it at that. I can choose how I respond, and more on the relationship stuff later. But that response is what I can control. I can't control that my hormones released and went, oh my gosh, the thoughts spun in my head like, wow, that was rude. Why is that the first thing that comes out of your mouth? Like, those thoughts are programmed. They're already there. Actually, we talked a little bit about this in the last episode with Kira about those patterns. And she mentioned with her husband when she says, hey, Mark, and he's automatically defensive, there's wiring there. So knowing that there's wiring there, doing that work to recognize that there's wiring there can allow you to then care for yourself through it. Not beat yourself up over it being there, because that's what that idea of control. I need to control myself. It's like iron fist around myself and not honoring What's happening? There is something happening there. There's a reason it's happening. There was a purpose to it at some point. It helped me in some way at some point, maybe even just being biological survival mode, whatever. Maybe something happened that I learned that pattern. Whatever it is, if I can care for myself through that and honor the fact that that is happening, rather than just acting as if because I shouldn't have that feeling, then I can nurture a new pattern instead of fighting myself to create a new pattern that may or may not be aligned with me. If my focus, instead of being on control, is on care, then I can love myself through the upheaval that can happen sometimes. I can let myself know that I'm worthy of being cared for by consistently caring for myself. And that honestly is the most important thing, to be consistent on as much as possible. But again, you don't want to beat yourself up over it, because then that's not caring, right? That's controlling. So if the focus is on caring for yourself, then when you have those triggers, when you jump on that emotional roller coaster, not because you wanted to, but because you're just kind of dragged onto it because of those patterns that exist in the subconscious, you can go, what do I need right now? What would support me? So that brings me to the tool that I have found very helpful in that support, both in those moments, but also just in general. And one tool that I've talked about before is the stress release response tool. There's a episode that I have on stress, and I walk through ways of releasing stress and caring for yourself through that, finding a way that is most supportive of you and the way you tend to be to release that stress, so that then you can access a new pattern. So go check that out. In general, you want to set a foundation for being able to care for yourself and for others, because a lot of you are probably very compassionate people. I know most of my clients would consider themselves compassionate, if not empathetic, empaths even. So being able to be that, but yet still be strong in yourself and be able to set boundaries that nurture you so that you don't become depleted and resentful, because that happens, right? And then we're in the survival mode and the stress response and all of that. But to be able to care for yourself, it starts with your priorities. It starts with having a very clear foundational process for honoring your priorities. So I've created a image that I'm going to have on my website in the blog for this, and I'll also post it on social media. I call it the priority pyramid. It's a concept that I was introduced to in Al-Anon, which is the idea of what sets those foundations for being able to care for other people. And it starts with a higher power, a connection to a higher power. That's the ground level. Now, higher power, you might call God. I like God as an acronym, the grand overall design. You could say the universe, spirit, whatever, something greater than yourself, basically. And the idea with that being the foundation is establishing a connectedness to a bigger picture. It's a sense that there is more, there's something bigger than you, so that you don't have to control all the things, that you fit in the world and you don't need to manage it all. So it releases some of the pressure of needing to essentially play the chess game of, well, if I do this and then they'll do this and I'll do this and they'll do this, which is very controlling. And it's hard not to fall into that when you're trying to control yourself and that energy is present, for it not to spill over into trying to control other people. It's like if you're frustrated in one area, you're more likely to get irritated by something in another area because that energy is present. So connecting to something greater than yourself and recognizing that you are not the one in control of the whole world and everything in it, and even all of the things that you impact. So tapping into that bigger picture is that foundation, because it's where all things stem from, and it releases some of that pressure. The next level is activating care in your own life. So tangible for you personally, just you, nurturing your needs, knowing who you are, giving yourself space to be you, know what you need, and then care for those needs. That involves self-care activities, but like setting boundaries, giving yourself space so that you don't feel like you have to respond right away, asking for what you need, asking for a little room, giving that to yourself. I also like to look at within this, like, what does your body need? What does your mind need? We all need nourishment in some way. So what nourishes your mind? What nourishes your body? What nourishes your heart and your emotional self? And what nourishes your spirit? What brings you joy? What helps you feel connected? And that kind of taps into that first level. But knowing what are those for you? Because that's not going to be the same for everybody else. And that's where some of the, reading books are helpful, listening to podcasts like this one is helpful. But any of the, you have to get up early and do these things, or XYZ is what self-care looks like, or this, that, and the other is what you have to do to be successful, does not necessarily work, because that's not necessarily what fits for you, what nourishes you on all the levels. So knowing what those are. And then up from there is like nourishing those people closest to you. Maybe it's your immediate family and their health and their well-being, and being able to pour into them. Now that, again, it's not controlling them. It is knowing first, again, what is nourishing, what is healthy for you, and what your boundaries are to take care of yourself, and then being able to pour out from there. If you don't have a solid you level, then you're likely to overgive into other people to try and fill the you level, which then starts creating dynamics of control instead of care. So the idea of setting an intention in a relationship, and I used to say purpose in a relationship, but purpose can often be turned into, again, another way of, what am I trying to get out of this relationship? What am I trying to control in the relationship? So being able to go, okay, what is my intention in the relationship? And this is my part of the relationship. What can I bring? I can't control what they take, but I can control what I bring. So with my kids, knowing that they are loved is what I would say my purpose is, but I can't control that. I cannot control that they know that. I can't control what happens inside their heads. What I can do with that, to turn that into an intention of being loving. See, that's that difference of having them know they're loved versus being loving. So what can I do? I can focus on being present. That can be difficult. Again, remember, concrete. There's this layer of concrete there. There's all this programming that we learned growing up, that we learned from our family, from teachers, from friends. Like there's a lot of stuff there. So just knowing that, again, back to care and nurturing ourselves through personal growth. And being present can also just be, I am doing this thing. Like when something on the to-do list or the whole to-do list pops up and the committee in your head starts gnawing on it. Like, oh, well, there are all these things, just repeating, I am here right now. This is what I'm focused on. Whatever this is, fill in the blank. Then saying, all right, where are they? Are they in their emotions? Did they make a mistake? Is it a mistake or is it a learning opportunity? Right? Like even when they've been told whatever it was 50 times, clearly they still need help learning it. And what helps with learning? Care. Care helps with learning. Now, again, that doesn't mean you're going to do it perfectly. And sometimes our emotions totally get the better of us. And gentle parenting is not easy with all that concrete. It's just not. So caring for yourself, we go back to that second tier, your health and well-being, caring for that. Another example would be a partnership with your spouse. What's the intention for me is partnership, right? So knowing where I'm at, because a partnership is person A plus person B equals relationship C. So knowing where I'm at, what my part of the equation is, am I bringing a -1 to the relationship right now? Or am I bringing a 10 to the relationship? And then knowing, what am I bringing to this? So that's the part I can control. But no matter what person B does, person A's bringing to the table will automatically influence C. Does that mean that if person B is not bringing anything to the table, person A should bring all of it? No, person A cannot bring all of it. But more on those dynamics in another podcast. Anyway, so with the partnership, that's the intention. So knowing where you're at, where your emotional space is at, where your energy is at, and then communicating that. So you can't control the other person's part. You can't control B. But if you've cared for A, then you'll have more room to be caring for person B, and also more space in the ability to communicate with them about what's going on for them and what's going on for you, being able to hear them. If you're so overwhelmed by where your space is because you haven't given yourself space to care for yourself, then it's going to be very difficult to have any room to take in anything from them. So that is where, again, we see that level, the foundations being set. And then, going up from there, you have your clients, your friends, your coworkers, your extended family, and then everyone else. So kind of knowing where you are in that pyramid and being able to take a look at it and go, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much time and energy goes to each of these sections currently? On a scale of 1 to 10, how much time and energy does your best self or your ideal self spend on each of these sections? What needs to shift to realign with your ideal self? And what is one action you could take today to move you closer to that alignment? Just one action. And the reason I like the scaling is because a lot of times we might be like, oh, I want to be at a 10. Well, if you're at a 2, it is completely unreasonable to jump to a 10. So going, well, what's a 3? What moves me one step closer? What does a 3 look like? Moves me one step closer to where I want to go. And I can get comfortable with that. And then I can take the next step, because we want to stretch our comfort zone, push a little bit against that concrete, and slow and steady wins the race, pushing little bits, and eventually we break through. And again, you may find yourself in any situation where instead of beating yourself up over having a reaction about falling into a pattern or doing something that didn't fit for you, going back to the who are you? What do you want? What do you need? What nourishes you so that you can then show up as more of your higher self within other relationships, with an ability to hear other people without getting knocked down and feeling like not being able to really listen deeply to someone else. Because you really can't if your space hasn't been nourished first. So that's that idea of caring for yourself versus controlling, caring for other people versus controlling, knowing what is yours and what is not yours, and making sure that you are focused on yours and those actions that you can take, because the actions are what teach the thoughts. They're what teach your brain the patterns. By taking action and being able to receive input from that action and knowing where your attention is focused. Are you focused on the potential danger? And is that reasonable? Is that needed in that space? Or is that a pattern? And then choosing where the focus is so that you can take in the information. And what information are you looking for? And allowing that to teach a new pattern. So that way you're nurturing new patterns instead of trying to white knuckle control new patterns, to control yourself, but loving yourself because you are deserving of love. And another really cool thing that I came across is that in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology says that intentional focus on your values and what really matters to you reduces the influence of other people's opinions. I didn't know that was a study, but it is. So making sure that you know what your values are, you know what's important to you, and you are centered in those conscious, chosen values. So you're nurturing yourself in those, and then you can act out of those in the next layers up from there. So that was a lot. How's everybody doing? I hope that that was helpful for you. At the very least, whether the priority pyramid feels like too much to take away, even just taking away, asking yourself, what is caring? And not assuming what other people need to be caring, but really like that compassion for yourself. You can't have compassion for other people if you're not being compassionate for yourself. You're more likely to try and force help instead of actually hearing what help other people want, because you're trying to get them to fill something inside of you because you are not filling it. So what does care look like in your life? If you want support with any of this, with discerning who you're being in the world, clarifying what that lens that you're looking through, the perception patterns that are happening in the background, and actions that you want to take to start building new patterns so that you can actually be more consistent in your life, first and foremost with the self-love, and then flowing from that into the actions that build whatever success looks like for you in your life. That's what I'm here for. That's what I do. I would love to support you. Feel free to grab a spot on my calendar for a free exploration session. There is no pressure here. My goal within that session is to care for you, to create space for you to discern what would be most supportive for you in getting where you want to go. And if that's something that I can help with and we can work together, I'm totally here for that too. I've got a few spaces still open in my calendar for clients. So grab that spot and I will talk to you all next time. Thanks for listening. I so appreciate you being here. If you got something out of today's episode, please share it. Leave me a review, take a screenshot and post it on social with a shout out to me. Send it to a friend or, all of the above. Want to hang out more? Join me on Instagram. Or better yet, get on my mailing list to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And remember, your possibilities are as unlimited as you are. Allow yourself to shine, my friend. The world needs your light. See you next time.